This is Tim Albright with an AVNation special, taking a look and celebrating Black History Month by interviewing and talking with the Black members of the AV community. With me today is Jasmine West. Jasmine is branch coordinator for Conference Technologies. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks for joining us. We'll talk about a couple of things that you're doing in your career in a second, because you've got some exciting things. But in general, and just kind of give us a baseline, tell us a little bit about your current position in the industry and kind of what you do to help your organization.
My current position, I am the coordinator for the office. So everyone always says, oh, coordinators have the hardest job at Conference Technologies because we kind of keep everyone on track. We monitor equipment coming in. We also the people who send the equipment orders to our purchasing sides internally. We do a lot of interfacing with our customers. Usually the branch coordinator is the first person they call, if not the second, to the salesperson if a customer has an issue or they want to know where their equipment's at, or when can we start this project, or hey, my project manager said this and I want to know this. We're just a catch-all for the company.
I a lot of times I will refer to them as the quarterback or kind of the traffic cop, right?
Yes.
Especially for local branches and stuff like that. Is that accurate?
Very accurate. I have a background in theater.
Okay.
So for my theater people, I always say we're the stage managers. We literally, that's what we do.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in the world of AV. You say you have a theater background. How did you get involved, not just with CTI, but in AV in general?
The program I went to was at a college called Texas Wesleyan, and the way that they run their theater program is very much like a grad school program. So that means everything that you see from the production side to the performance, everything is done by the students. And it's an undergrad program, but we built the sets, we do the sound designs, we do the light designs, we do the set designs, costume, anything that needs to be done. Every aspect of the show is student ran. And so when you're in the program for your bachelor's, they kind of require you to take all the technical courses, and you have to have X amount of hours. I think when I was there, it was 360 hours a semester in the theater. Wow. Outside of your courses. So a lot of times you end up going over that, if you can believe it. But it's like, okay, if you didn't get cast or if you want to learn something, you can offer or apply to be a sound design or to do, stage managing or things like that. And so oftentimes you end up playing multiple roles. You end up doing the box office for the front of the house, or sometimes you end up, doing the light design. I had a part-time job in the scene shop, and my favorite part of any production was doing the rig. So there's something about hanging speakers on a rig or your lighting fixtures, climbing up there. I felt like a little spider monkey. It was very fun. Obviously following OSHA compliances.
Yes, absolutely.
My foreman would be so mad if I didn't add that. But so that was kind of my first taste of AV. And of course, when you're in theater, no one calls it AV. It's just theater. It's just what you do. And after I graduated, I was looking for jobs, and I asked one of my professors, I said, what is AV? There's this company in Dallas. Like, what's AV? They were like, oh, it's what you've been doing for 4 years. And I was like, oh, so I should apply for it. And he was like, yeah, it seems like it's a desk job, but yeah, sure, why not? It's in the industry. So I applied and landed at Conference Tech.
Awesome. And I will say, OSHA approved, absolutely, but the look of the theater is much different from that height, and it's something that if you've never done it, you should do it at least once in your life.
Yes, so. Gorgeous.
Absolutely. So you obviously spent 4 years in theater and in kind of the nuts and bolts of the industry through theater and through kind of the live stage portion of it. As a woman of color and as a Black person in the industry, both through education, through higher education, as well as working in it on a daily basis, what has been kind of your experience, as a Black individual in the industry, and what obstacles have you faced?
I think my experience, for the most part, would mirror the experience of a lot of other Black individuals who are just working in America, right? Yeah. So regardless of the field, you're going to have no microaggressions or sometimes people who don't mean to be offensive, they're making a joke and you're like, haha, it's not funny. Here's why. I will say in theater, it's a bit different because theater is kind of known to be the more accepting or the more diverse, even. So the issues I had in theater, especially around AV, weren't necessarily as common or blatant. They were like smaller things, and it was usually from lack of knowledge or information or a sense of familiarity within the theater. However, in AV, there isn't a lot of Black people who work in the field.
Yeah.
And when I was hired, one of the hiring managers, we had a very truthful conversation because when I'm not working my 8 to 5, I do comedy and I write stories. And so I had like my website was up and, they had seen all of that. And I said, well, I want to have this honest conversation, will I have to change my work outside of being here? And he said, no. He did warn me. He said, AV is a very typically older white male's game. He said, the industry, predominantly white men, a lot of them have been in it for years, and that's the bulk of what you're going to be dealing with. He was like, we're trying to shake that up. I'm trying to change that and slowly, break that up a bit. He was like, but just, this is what you're in for. And I was like, okay, it's fine. Everyone says that. And then I went to train at corporate and I was like, oh, he really meant that.
He wasn't joking. No.
Right. I was like, oh, it was like one meeting after the other was white man, white man. I was like, okay, well, I mean, they're all nice enough. But I think after around a year of just being in it, you realize small microaggressions or small things like sometimes I've had a project manager one time say, go make me a sandwich. And I was like, okay, are you saying that because I'm Black, or are you saying that because I'm a woman? Or maybe I'm just imagining things and it's not that, but we don't really have, Black colleagues to turn to and say, hey, did this sound weird to you? They're kind of just, stuck texting your group chat of friends saying like, hey, this happened at work. What do y'all think? And, thankfully, with the company, with Conference Tech, they've been very accepting. But there is like two worlds. Like when I first came on, I felt the need to what we call code switch, which is where we use a different speaking voice and different words. We erase some words out of our vernacular to fit in more with the culture, right?
Okay.
And some people would say, oh, it's just a professional voice. But when you're a Black person working in a white field, you especially have to heighten that and be on your P's and Q's and just make sure, just code switching. Whereas if you see a Black person outside of the office, like sometimes my director will see me at a comedy show with my Black sketch group, and we talk very differently. It's African-American vernacular English. It's
Okay.
AAVE is what it's known as. And it's a different language. I mean, obviously it's English, but I guess the best way I can explain it would be slang almost, but not as aggressive as most people think when they hear slang.
Slang has various connotations. Absolutely.
Right. So it's something that when I first came here, I code switched constantly. And I wouldn't make, most people in the workplace, if you're in a meeting, they'll make a reference, like a Friends reference or a Seinfeld reference, or typically a show that is enjoyed by a white audience. But as a Black person, you're like, well, I can't make my reference because, they're not going to get it. And I kind of had an awakening around, I guess, a year and a half here. It was back when the George Floyd protests and Breonna Taylor protests were happening. I was seeing companies everywhere come out and make these very bold statements. My friends were emailing me emails they had gotten from their CEOs and their presidents. And I was like, well, my company hasn't said anything. And I was very conflicted with that. So I emailed Kathy Kelly, our vice president, and I very nicely was like, hey, as a Black employee, we all see what's happening. Like I would have meetings and different people from corporate would say, hey, like, how are you doing? Like, I know what's going on. Are you okay? Do you need anything? And so I was like, people are noticing there's something going on, but there hasn't been a uniformed response to it. And thankfully, they did make a donation to the NAACP legal an education fund on my behalf, which is one of the things I requested. But they also sent out like an email and reminded people of the resources that we have for diversity training. And so just being seen, I felt very grateful to be at a company where I felt comfortable opening up that line of communication, and B, where the company was kind enough to really hear me and listen and see me and be transparent to take action. And that doesn't always happen, you know? And after I saw that, okay, this company is going to really accept me, I stopped code switching. You know, I'll be in meetings and I'll make a cool on the gang reference, or I'll like sometimes I'll say, what up? You know, like what's happening? And like, they all get it. And it's been really great. But I think because of the stark contrast of being in AV versus other industries that are more diverse, there is an adjustment period where you're kind of like putting your toe in the pool, like, okay, can I wear my dreadlocks here? Or should I wear a straight wig? You know, like what's comfortable, what's not comfortable. It just takes a time to find it. But I think that's with AV, it's a bit more intense because it is so white and male heavy.
And I'm going to ask a couple different questions because, first of all, I've never heard the phrase code switching, and I am fascinated by this. And I have said this in darn near every interview that we've done in these. I understand where I am. I know what I am. I'm a white guy, right? I'm a straight white guy. I understand that there are some limitations that I have in doing these interviews, quite frankly, but in even having these conversations. Explain for me more than anybody and anybody listening to this, some of that process of code switching. And is it, I guess the best way to word this, and it's going to be clunky, so I apologize. Is it harmful to have to code switch? Is it stressful? Is it, you know, whether that's, you know, in a social environment or a work environment? And you mentioned the fact that as you got more comfortable in the work environment, as you got, you know, felt seen and more accepted, you were able to kind of put down that code switching. So help me kind of unpack that phrase for a second and how that translates.
I think so. Is it harmful to code switching? It really depends on where you're at, right? Because say I work for a large marketing firm, and say they may have hired me as a diversity hire. So if they hired me because they want to diversify their employees, they may not necessarily see me as qualified or possessing the skills necessary to do the work. So if I don't code switch, when they hear me speak in a way that they are not familiar with, for them, it may translate as uneducated
Okay.
or ignorant or not cultured, even though I argue my LinkedIn profile says I'm a Black culture connoisseur. I will argue that Black people, it is a culture, a very marketable one at that, but they may see it as uncultured or not well read or just negative connotations because, like, for example, on the other side of that coin, right? Sometimes I'll take a phone call or I'll send an email and someone will compliment me on, wow, your customer service voice or your, you know, the way you took that phone call was so elegant, so nicely put. And or it's sometimes someone will say, oh, you're so well spoken, right? And what's interesting is that the amount of white people that get told they're well spoken versus Black people,
Yep.
you know, that's usually something that's reserved for.
I have a story really quickly, and I
Mhm.
apologize. I worked with one of my at the time one of my dearest friends in radio. This is 100 years ago, so don't, you know. And his name was David Myers,
Mhm.
still around, still with us today. And David was the afternoon drive jock for a adult contemporary adult contemporary radio station.
Mhm.
David was a very large Black man. Okay. And grew up in Peoria, Illinois, just, you
Oh,
know, halfway between St. Louis and Chicago.
yeah.
And I remember this, and I will probably always remember this. We were doing a remote, and I was helping out. I was a morning show producer, and we got to know David really well. And one of the first remotes I ever did with him, a listener came up, and somebody said something about, "Hey, would you want to say hi to David Myers?" And they looked at David, and then David, you know, again, not just tall, but also, you know, robust.
Yeah.
Um, um, and I said, "But you're Black." And I was Jasmine, I was taken aback, right? I mean, yeah, he I understood,
Right.
logically, yes, he's a black man. I get that. But that's not what that person was saying.
Right.
Inherently saying you don't sound black.
Exactly.
Right. And understand I live in St. Louis and this is where the radio station was. And there are we have a history.
Yes.
um,
Oh, yes.
so I that was kind of one of the first times, and this is my early mid 20s, where you kind of start seeing that and be having a relationship with David was why I was able to see things through kind of his eyes, not entirely obviously,
Yeah.
but some of those comments sometimes people mean it sometimes
Hmm.
not as a compliment, but really
Yeah.
what you're saying is I expected less of you because of the color of your skin. Is that accurate?
Exactly. That's on the head, which is why code switching is a very popular, I would say, survival tool
Okay.
for Black Americans in the workforce.
All right. One other thing I want to hit on before I let you go to here, and that is something you said about the lack of knowledge of Black individuals in the workplace.
Hmm.
How do we fix that? How do we the simplest, again, understanding where I am and who I am, the simplest thing for me is just, okay, hire more Black people and you'll be around them more. But seriousness, how do we educate, a predominantly white male environment, a predominantly white male industry to, it's not, I'm not talking about acceptance. I'm just talking about, working more closely with people on a day-to-day basis and increasing our knowledge of them, of their culture,
Hmm.
and of what it's like to work with them.
There are thousands of resources online for companies. There are whole companies who come in and do diversity training. Um, there are obviously online sources like we have where you can sit in front of a computer screen and this computer tells you about diversity. But it's different when you have a person of color come in and actually talk to you, form a connection, and genuinely face to face. I mean, not with COVID, but face to face, kind of have those conversations and do those workshops. And I think a lot of times what happens is a company gets to a point where they say, we need to do this diversity training, and they have a diversity training. And it's like, this is not a one-time special event live at the Apollo. This needs to
Yeah.
be a active work. It's active work. It's not something that's passive. I also think that when it comes to getting more Black people into the workplace, part of that starts with keeping the Black people you have at your workplace,
Okay.
because it's kind of like you don't want to invite someone in to be uncomfortable. And then once they're there, I mean, you have those conversations and you talk to your Black employees, and most Black employees are going to tell you, Google it. We're not ask a Black person. But I think that a part of it starts with like recruitment and starts with checking our biases, because I do not believe that Black people aren't applying for the jobs. I just believe that their applications aren't being seen or they're being overlooked.
Yeah.
And not necessarily because of, the fact that they're Black, but when we have unchecked biases, our subconscious makes decisions that we don't realize may isolate certain groups of people, which is why you need bias training.
Well, yeah, and there is certain, and we've a couple of the other interviews we've done, we dealt with the fact that there are several studies out there about by inherent biases when it comes to you know ethnic sounding names, right? If,
Hmm.
if it doesn't sound or look, quite frankly, Anglo,
Yeah.
then people are less likely to even call you back or call you for
Yeah.
a
And it's names and it's colleges, it's sometimes people put their address or location on the application. It's cities. It's a various number of factors, but
yeah.
name would be the biggest one. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And before we let you go, I do want to give you a platform to talk about some exciting news that you have, because Jasmine is heading to one of my favorite places in the entire world. It is called Second City, and if you're not familiar with it, you need to stop listening right now and then just look up. If you're a fan of SNL, if you're a fan of comedy, if you're a fan of anything Chicago, this is the place you have to go. Jasmine is heading to an MFA program, and where she will get to work with the fine folks at Second City to explain folks, kind of where you're headed for and what you're doing.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So I've been doing comedy for the past 7 years, and predominantly at Dallas Comedy House, which is based in Dallas, Texas. Meant they closed due to the pandemic, And I write sketches and screenplays and blogs. I write anything that comes to mind. And so I applied for, with my background in theater and storytelling through theater being my main platform, I applied for an MFA program at DePaul University, located in Chicago, Illinois.
Yep.
And they have a standard concentration for screenwriting, but they also have a comedy concentration for screenwriting. And the comedy concentration is in the partnership with Second City Chicago. So the fine people at Second City met up with DePaul and wrote a curriculum for comedic screenwriting. And while you're at the program, you take classes at DePaul, obviously, as your main course, but you also take classes at Second City's Fine Conservatory, which is the best in the nation. It doesn't get funnier than Second City.
Dope.
So that is where I will be headed fall 21. Very excited, very thrilled. They also offered me a scholarship. So I'm just still over the moon and in shock, because if you do comedy, Second City is the dream. Like Second
Yep.
City is like, you've made it. So I'm just very fortunate and happy.
You and I could sit here for the rest of the day and talk about all of the alumni of Second City. Seriously.
Yes.
I had just met you for the first time last week, and I am just excited for you, and excited to know somebody that's going to Second City. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Awesome. Jasmine West from Conference Technologies. Thank you. For AVNation, go by our website. We are not as fancy as Second City, but it's AV and stuff. AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv. You'll find this, and check out our 2 weekly programs. One looks at the residential side of AV, the other at the commercial side of AV. All that and more at AVNation.tv. That's AVNation.tv.